He gets picked up better on the mics than we do sometimes.
Right? Is it because he has a deep voice? Like, fuck that shit. Microphones are sexist.
Hello and welcome back to Girls Talk Comics. Today it's your girl, Lieutenant of Literature, hollering at you from the great wide interwebs. With me is our master of mediocrity.
What's up, y'all? Not quite hollering because I got a little bit of a cold. Sorry.
What's your name?
Oh, shoot. Aaron? Yes, my name is Aaron, the master of mediocrity.
So, what are we reading today, Miss Aaron?
All right, so today we are talking about Something is Killing the Children, Volume 1. Published by Boom Studios with creative team James Tynion IV and Werther Dell'Edera. It's set in Archer's Peak, and it's got kind of a cool premise. So there's this kid, Jimmy. And Jimmy is trying to have the best sleepover, but it kind of turns out to be the worst sleepover ever. I mean, everything starts off fine. He and his friends are telling horror stories and playing Truth or Dare. Even his crush Carl was over. But things escalate and quickly transform this night into one Jimmy wishes he could forget. One dare too many, and he and his friends are out in the woods at night in a ravine, and well, shit gets real fucking gory. And spoiler alert, Jimmy is the only one who comes out of it alive. Of course, this comes with all kinds of rumors that he killed his friends, probably some satanic beliefs, and well, as horrible as that would be, I think Jimmy would rather have been a serial killer than have seen what he saw. 'Cause, like, monsters are real here. So then there's Erica, young woman, monster hunter, maybe even a monster herself. I don't really know. She has this possessed doll as her, like, only friend. She's terrifying, strange, and really effective. She's our heroine. She's been sent to Archer's Peak by some off-screen handler. And quickly finds herself in a bit over her head. It doesn't help that she also has this incredibly persistent child and a vengeful young man trying to follow her too. There's a lot going on in Archer's Peak, and I was relieved when Erica showed up because that meant I started getting an idea of what was going on. What were your thoughts on it?
I also was happy when Erica showed up. I think the way they introduced that character was probably one of the best things. Because she shows up, gory as fuck, covered in just blood, walking up to this little girl who seems to be, like, missing some limbs, probably from this terrible thing that happened to her. And you see her sit down, and you're not sure if she's just going to off the kid, or if she's with the kid, or what's going to happen. Like, there's this, like, 2 or 3 panels of suspense where she's just there. This gory, blood-covered young woman who looks bad as shit, and is also, like, one of the poster kids for why masks are awesome. And everyone should be wearing them. And we see a little bit of her handler kind of interacting with her, and so we know about at that time that this woman knows what's going on, and that she's sort of, it's like the Stranger Things version of what a Slayer would be.
Definitely.
And she has the best last name ever.
Very on the nose last name. I mean, Erica Slaughter, not much better you can do than that. I mean, that's straight up. It's like if Buffy's last name was Hunter. Like,
yeah, no kidding.
Let's be real.
I really liked how they did all of it. It has one of probably the best page turn title cards in the entire industry. Fight Me. It uses 2 full pages in the middle of this to just, every single issue has it, where it's just this black and sort of reddish title screen. And it just says Something is Killing the Children in this really intimidating font, which is the same font it has on each cover. And it is the most jarring page flip every time. Every single time I turned to that title card, I was like, straight into classic Slaughterhouse movies. This is just a really fun series. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
I'm actually really glad you mentioned the kind of Slaughterhouse films, because James Tynion IV, the author, he has a lot of history with horror comics. He wrote Memetic, which is a kind of a horror post-apocalyptic series. He's done a lot of stuff with Batman and DC, like I think most of his career has been with that. But he actually just started a pay what you want online horror anthology series called Razor Blades that you can find at readrazorblades.com. But that's a horror, a horror anthology series, because that just seems to be James' thing. So, of course, they're going to have this cinematic, something is killing the children, style, because that's probably the shit he grew up with and loved.
For sure. And it uses art very well. And there are 2 or 3 different sort of atmospheric panels they use in the background to sort of indicate to you, which are your breathing scenes where they're doing their detective bit, and which ones are their action scenes, and where they're doing their snooping and Scooby Dance sort of situation. Not Scooby Dance.
Right.
Scooby Gang situation. Then you also have sort of the hardcore demonic overcast that is sort of reminiscent of Satanic Panic sort of, with the dolls and the creepy but they're all kind of strung together, so you're not sure what it says about the characters that find themselves in those atmospheres, because it doesn't seem to indicate that they're bad, but it is definitely different sections that are veiled off from each other. I don't know. It's just a very intriguing sort of art that pulls you through this. It's not super hard, fast, quick, but it is action-packed in a very paced kind of way.
Kinda. So real bit about Werther Dell'Edera. I couldn't find a lot about him, but he's done a lot of things with DC and Marvel, kind of like anybody else. He's done some Vertigo stuff. His most popular title that came up was Dark Entries. That was published back in 2010. He was the artist on that. I think he reads manga, and that was about all that I can learn about him, because I don't think he's a US local. And the only other language I speak is Russian, and not very well. So I don't know if he's European or South American, because some of the languages all blend together visually for me. And so I'd have to do a lot of translation probably to find stuff on him. And I'm not that skilled at that. And we had to record, so I had to stop searching at some point. No, his art I think is really, really great. He definitely has a good pacing, and I really love how he set it up, because in the scene that you were talking about where we get introduced to Erica and she's with that younger girl, I think they did one of my favorite things to do in comics, and that is to just kind of have a panel pause. Because I felt like there was just a pause where Erica's looking at the girl before she just asks if she can use her shower. And I love that kind of narrative where you just give that natural kind of break with it. And I think they kind of had an Applebee's knockoff. Yeah, and Werther did a really great job at capturing that, that vibe in it. He really did well.
They did an interesting pacing thing on that conversation you're talking about, where she's on the phone having a separate conversation, and she does that thing that you do when you're on the phone, and you're like, hold on, can I? And then, goes back to ignoring. And she does this several times. Every time she pulls that stupid phone out, she's, ignoring everyone around her, but then also, demanding information from them. And it feels very like real phone conversations I've had, and people who, there's always those people who have that bad, phone etiquette that do that to you. And you're just like, hold on, wait, what? Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. I mean, and Erica totally has that vibe of just, I have to do, what I have to do to save people's lives. And Werther gets that body language down really well. James gets the dialogue down really well. And I really enjoyed it as a writing piece. I'm waiting for volume 2 to come out because the singles are kind of hard to find.
I read issue 6. Is that involved in the first volume? Yeah, so it seems like issue 1 through 6 is in volume 1.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because you get introduced to Bianca a little bit more when she's drawing and stuff. And that was a very, just to skip to that scene a little bit, that was a very authentic thing. There's this little girl that is alive in this monster den, and so when they do the first sort of baddie battle interaction, that they take this live girl out who's been through this extreme trauma, and she refuses to give them her last name, and so she's just chilling out in the police precinct, which is a fairly safe place for a little girl to be if you've gone through that kind of a trauma, and she's just drawing, and that is step number 1 with most children after they've gone through some intense thing is they just sit there doodling and drawing these terrible things that is just coping mechanism,
it's an easy task to also give children.
Yeah, it's a visual language that they understand whenever words are failing them, and words for trauma are hard to come by even as adults, so, like, this is good. It feels like very much like child psychology 101 a little bit, but also it gives us this huge, like, insight into Bianca's character, because she's so good with childhood trauma. She's so good with these children. She goes out of her way to interact with these children that survive these instances, and yeah, you can see a little bit is her getting information and figuring out what class of monster it is that she's fighting, but on the other side, you can see her really handling them with emotional maturity, like, no, this isn't your fault, like, don't take any of this, like, I'm just frustrated, I'm trying to do my job, but that doesn't mean anything, like, I shouldn't be putting this off on you, you know, talking to children like they're adults, you know, with, like, adult feelings and interacting with them on their level, and she just, through this whole series, she's my favorite, by the way. Let me just skip to that. She's my favorite, because through this whole series,
Bianca or
just
Erica? Because you said Bianca.
Erica Slaughterhouse is my favorite.
Okay, thank you.
Because she has this air of authority that is just projected. Is just ingrained in her character. And yeah, she's a young woman, you know, obviously drinking age, but, like, still a young woman. And, like, it's never brought attention to, other than the fact that it's, like, crazy things are happening, how do you know what is going on? That has been put under the microscope with the sheriff and everything, but none of them are like, what are you doing, little girl? You know, like, none of them are, like, calling her authority into account for her feminineness. It's all just because it's crazy and nobody should have any authority on crazy, you know? Which I thought was really nice. Like,
right.
It was something I immediately noticed, and it was very, very nice.
So, yeah, Erica is a really great character, and she has a lot of depth, and I'm really interested in seeing how the rest of the story goes. My favorite character, though, is a side character who doesn't even get a name. It's the waitress at the knockoff Applebee's who, like, figures out that Erica and the little boy Jimmy are talking about some weird stuff. And so she's important as a plot device because there's another character in the book called Tommy. And Tommy is an older brother of one of the kids who's gone missing. And so his coworker comes over and is like, hey, that woman's talking about some of the stuff that is related to your sister, and or like some other weird kids. I wonder if she knows anything about your sister. And then Tommy, you know, confronts her and becomes that vengeful a young man who's trying to follow her and get involved. Spoiler, he shouldn't have done that. He should have just... But, you know, sometimes in every typical horror movie, you have to have somebody who's just like, I'm gonna get in over my head because I'm angry or, you know, overly confident. And I can't deny him any of his feelings, wanting to find his sister, her being a new person in town who could be an easy target for, or easily blamed, or could have been involved. I mean, he doesn't know. He certainly found out what was going on, but at the time he didn't know. So I just appreciate that waitress who's just kind of like gossiping. It's like,
yeah,
hey, I put this clue together, and just mentions it to people, and, you know, it sends the rest of the story on its spiraling off. But what I like about her too, one of the things that gets me in movies, and I'm seeing it happen more often in movies and in TV shows, is that there's something bizarre that happens that nobody seems to react to. Like, you'll have a character just kind of show up in the middle of nowhere due to some sci-fi stuff, and people are just kind of, like, shocked, but then just go back and reading the newspaper. Whereas she's somebody who's like, hey, there's some weird stuff happening. I'm actually going to comment on it. Like, I really appreciate writers and filmmakers and other creators who are allowing peripheral characters who have no impact, agency in the fact that they're actually reacting to the world around them. Being it just some random story or thing that just, they're just like, I'm just a body. I'm just going to be a casualty of war. You know, they're like, oh, I can actually have an emotional response to this. This is actually weird for my community. That was what she was for me, is actually showing that a lot of people are interested in what's happening to the children. It's very topical, and they are talking about it. So that's why she is my favorite. It's a weird reason.
I was actively upset she didn't get a name, because whenever you asked me what her name was and I went back and looked for it, I was like, she's here like 3 different times, moving the plot forward fairly substantially, and why aren't they giving her a name? Because she has a scene where she's feeding into the angry fire at the bar with Tommy. Like, yeah, it's fucking weird. Like, feeding into that with some other, like, third guy who's drinking, and they're telling the story too. And she, like, goes to Tommy's dad's house with him in the vehicle with him to get a gun, which is a big plot device that moves us all forward. And she doesn't have a name. But I will say that they did such no piece of this comic was wasted. There was no erroneous thing that didn't play out, and they didn't make you wait 3 volumes to go, oh yeah, that one small scene back in the... No, it was like immediately paying off. Whenever we are introduced to the Tommy character, we see this extreme stress that he's under at home with his sister being gone. So it kind of lays the foundation for him to be a sympathetic pain in the ass, as opposed to just a pain in the ass vengeful character. He's just not like angry white manning it. He's like, I'm under a lot of stress. I am a bereaved person who's missing a part of their immediate family that I have a protector role over as a big brother, So he is very fully fleshed out in like 3 pages. Yeah, to your point about the community thing, she does a lot. Back to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. They always have this weird thing at the Hellmouth where like everyone is together for like this candlelight vigil, and then everything goes back to normal. And they did a good job of making the community stuck in that period of candlelight vigil. You see the principal under extreme stress. You see other characters at the school under extreme stress. You see the police officers and all of the secretaries and stuff. You see every single person is not acting normally because they are under this community-wide, kids are gone, like what's happening. And I don't know, it's hard to explain whenever you're reading comics that do seem to waste space, quote unquote, what the difference is between something that is as densely packed as this and something that is more wasteful with what they're showing you art-wise and like dialogue-wise. It's hard to tell like what it is that it's missing whenever it's not like this, but this is so compressed and does such a good job. Each issue, even though it's only like 15, 25 pages, it feels like you've gotten somewhere in the story, Right. Well, the compressed storytelling in this is like really evident in conjunction to a Superman episode where you get a couple of pages of just like stuff happening that never matters again ever. I think it kind of goes to, I like limited series and stuff because I think they try to do more of this, and then once a story gets too bloated, then you're just like wasting the resources you have, and I'm like, that means that you need to be guillotined, start over, find something new. The end.
I don't disagree. I was just thinking about the Miles Morales stuff that I read. And I don't know if it's just the nature of the stories that they're trying to say with superheroes versus horror stories, because Something is Killing the Children is more of a horror story. It's nothing like a superhero story. There are no superheroes in this. Is that superheroes stories, since they're targeting more towards children, I feel like there's a lot more narrative they have to do to avoid mature art or like PG-13 art or that environmental storytelling that I think can be pulled off in non-Marvel or non-DC, non-superhero stories. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because they have to, like, curb themselves to keep from pushing the kids' radars, and also just a little bit more, like, they have to explain themselves more thoroughly whenever you're dealing with younger audiences. But I will say, I think that's a bullshit adult thing, and that a lot of good younger media, like the Lumberjanes, or, like, Adventure Time, better storytelling for children, She-Ra, all of that. They trust the kids a little bit more. So I don't know. Like, yeah, I do think you're right, though. They do have to do a little bit more to avoid pushing the envelope. Then that's just, it's part of being the man, If you're the man, quote unquote, if you're the establishment, you have a lot less fun things you can do.
That's a fair point.
Fuck the man.
I think the artist is also doing stuff for that Razor Blades project of James's, which is awesome. And James has done some other self-published works. So I think they both do have opportunities to kind of flex their own creative muscle. His first original comic series was called The Eighth Seal. And that was done through a digital comic publisher called Thrillbent. It's an apocalyptic book To quote Wikipedia, it says, "The series, an apocalyptic blend of political intrigue and body horror," was published on Thrillbent, and then there was a follow-up called The House on the Wall. That was written by somebody else, or co-written with somebody else.
That political blended with body horror, you know what the first thing that made me think of is? Lady Bird.
That's true. Yeah.
I also figured out why I keep talking about Buffy.
Why is that?
Because Boom Studios is also the vehicle for all of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer comics. So all of the issues have Buffy, like, ads at the end of it. Not just because, like, there are some thematic, like, it does look and feel a little bit like Stranger Things meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but it also, like, I was actually, like, being fed Buffy subconsciously through ads in the back of the comic, too.
That's how they get you.
That is how they get you. Would you like this to be adapted someday into, like, a TV series or a movie?
I think it's perfectly set up to be adapted into a TV series or movie. I think a TV series would be more fulfilling than a movie would, because it has the pacing that I think works better with a TV series. But I wouldn't want it to be, like, more than maybe 2 or 3 seasons. It really depends on how long they can keep the series going, or keep the comic series going. I think that this first volume was good for, like, a 1 to 3 episode arc. And if I don't know how long they plan on writing the series, if it's going to be 2 or 3 volumes, but even if it's just, like, 1 season, I could be satisfied with that. You know, Supernatural's not on the air anymore, and, like, let's get something that's good out.
This would kind of fill that Supernatural hole a little bit, I think. Definitely. Like, especially with some of the language they were using to describe the monsters. Classes, and we have little stuffed animal octopus that seems to be sort of, like, possessed by some sort of intel thing that they have, like a walkie-talkie, but supernatural, or, you know. I could see them going into a more hard world building. Like, I enjoy soft world building a lot, but I could see them going a little bit harder and giving you a bit more, like, class identifiers and stuff. I wouldn't want them to go too far into it. Like, I don't want a Pacific Rim situation where they have, like, you know, like, which kind of Titan is it?
Yeah,
you know,
not
I don't
at
want
all.
that. But
yeah,
I think there's
definitely an opportunity for this to be adapted.
Agreed. And I think it's perfect for it. I think this is kind of the stuff that they've been optioning through Netflix a lot. Like, I've noticed that a lot of Netflix originals have been sort of kind of like this a little bit, you know, like these sort of pseudo horror slasher, like, kind of nostalgic 90s feeling TV shows and books, and, like, based on books and comics and stuff. So I think this would be amazing. But I also want, like, a Supernatural Buffy Stranger Things thing.
No, HBO's been getting in on this too. I mean, on Netflix, there's, of course, Stranger Things. There's also The Dark, which I think is German, but it's been really popular lately with a lot of my American friends. HBO has The Outsider, which is an adaptation of a Stephen King novel. They've got Lovecraft Country, which just started in August. So this is definitely a series that can kind of come along with all of that. October Faction was also something that was a comic that was adapted. So there is definitely a spot in which this could exist. And with that hard world building, I also don't want that. I think that part of the horror in this is not fully understanding what is going on. And I think some of what can happen in sci-fi films is that they try to explain too much, and it's a little overwhelming and takes away from the narrative. So if they're just kind of like, we're going to gloss this over, we're going to, you know, explain things as needed, but not in that kind of, oh, this is stronger than that one because of hand-waving anime bullshit. Just like kind of doing that very precarious balance of allowing us to feel that this is real and also very fantastical, which is what I liked about Stranger Things. It's what I liked about Dark. October Faction, I think, did a really good balance as well. Yeah, there's definitely, I think, a place for this.
Yeah, I really like this a lot. I I don't know why I saw it. Something about, I think it was at volume number 2 or 3 was out already, and I just walked by it on the shelf, and something about the title, the way that they have the titles written, like that faintly ominous typography, and just the covers are really good in these, you know. It was volume number 2. It has a picture of Erica Slaughterhouse's face on it, and I saw it, and I was like, I want to know what she's about, you know? And then I went and picked up volume 1 and put it on my profile, and that's all it took. You know, it's just this really compelling, I don't know, something about it grabs you. It grabs your attention.
We should specify that you were talking about issue and not volume 1, 2, and
yes,
3.
Sorry,
because
right.
only volume 1 at the time of recording is out.
I'm a bad comics reader. It's really rare for me to deal in issues. It's a hard thing for me to specify issues because I'm always buying volumes. So bad, Jessica.
Right. No, definitely. It's okay. You're forgiven. Yeah, when this came out at first, I avoided it because I think it had a lot of reprints. Or it came out at the same time as Once and Future King. But those came out and they were very, very hyped. And I just kind of avoided it because I was working in the comic shop at the time. And now I don't work with customers directly. But at the time I was. And I was getting really, really burnt out on speculators. So when somebody comes up to me and they're like, this is a hot title and it's a speculator book, I am just automatically turned against it because it's usually going to be like a flash in the pan, short-lived obsession. And I was kind of right and also very wrong. Like, this is a really good book. And it's a really enjoyable book and it's a really great good storytelling. I can't say that it's good because it's horror, and like good might give the misleading that it's any audience could pick it up and enjoy it. I think you have to be open to horror to read this, but it is really great storytelling. It's really good art, and however, it did, I think, kind of have more of a flash in the pan. It's very hard for us to get issues in, but I'm seeing more issues stay on the shelf. Mm-hmm. But we're also ordering very few issues because there aren't a lot of people reading it from the shelf. I don't know how many people have it on their pull at the store, but I still think it was always a small number of readers. That might also be just from the fact that Boom Studios has a small audience. They're not Marvel, they're not DC, and because Boom Studios produces such a variety of work, I think it's a little harder for people to stay engaged with them. I mean, they do anything from, I think they did Rocko's Modern Life, they do Steven Universe, to Lumberjanes, to, you know, this kind of material. So it's very all over the place. They did Coda when that was out. Yeah. So it's just a lot of different works. And I think some people will gravitate to Marvel and DC because it's always superheroes all the time. Whereas in Image Comics, it's like, at least it's always going to be some tea for teen to more adult content. Whereas Boom, you're like, I don't know, do you want a kid mag or a porn mag? You know, like, it's just so all over the place that I don't
We have it all. Holds open.
We have it all, but people engage with it. Right. Ugh. No thanks. That I think it's a little harder for people to kind of engage with the company because it's so all over the place. But Boom has access to like some hidden gems that I don't think Marvel will ever produce. So again, if you're somebody who's a little burnout or tired of the typical Marvel DC stuff, or you want to try something new, go to Boom Studios and check out their catalog. You're going to find the different, smaller, non-superhero stories through them.
It's definitely, you're going to be able to find something that you enjoy. Like, they're varied enough, you can find something you enjoy. I had forgotten all about Lumberjanes being a Boom Studios. And yeah, it's a little hard. to pitch horror comics to people, I didn't realize how hard it is for some people to watch horror. Like, I just always, I don't know, I had that internalized misogyny thing where it was like, oh yeah, of course I like all this shit because, like, I'm a hardcore biatch in high school, you know, like, it was part of that whole, like, the cool girl sort of thing, so I always just was into all of that, like, heavy metal, like, horror movies, you know, WWE or whatever, like, I could watch all of it, like, no problem. And, you know, like, eventually I got to really appreciate the art form a little bit as I matured and became an older adult, but then I also, like, have a lot of mom friends now who, like, used to enjoy it, you know, in sort of the same way, and then kind of turned into this super empathetic machine that's like, if it's like real people doing bad things and, you know, like any kids are involved, nah. So I have a whole group of people who I want to read this because I enjoy it, it's a good story, but who will absolutely not because it, like, trigger warning, children death, you know, like, and so they're just like absolutely not going to in any universe look at this show. So it's kind of interesting, like, being older and being a lot less like emo hipster cool kid, like, you realize people really do have a lot of preferences and levels, and it's not just because of like, oh, you know, like, it's bringing up my personal trauma, it just makes them uncomfortable, and that's okay. So yeah, I think you're right, it is a little harder the older I get to say, oh, this is really good to people, because like it might not be good for them, and you just
right.
let people enjoy the things that they enjoy and not try to don't go out of your way to traumatize people because you just want them to be able to talk about the story with you. Like, that's not a good thing. That's not safe, sane behavior. So, oh well. But yeah, no, if you enjoy horror, you should definitely check this out.
I also have a weird relationship with horror media. I'm one of those people, I can handle crime serials better than I can like the Halloween movie. There's something about that consistent tension and that development of a villain and something supernatural that I can't do. But this one feels a little bit more like what I enjoy with crime serials and true crime things, because there is Erica Slaughter who has done this before and she can investigate and she understands it. So instead of it being some incomprehensible horror, there is a character here who's like, I've been exposed to this, I'm aware of it, and I'm going to kick its ass. So then me as the reader could be like, yes, great, this is consumable. So
yeah,
that's my little 2 cents on it. If you are kind of interested in horror stuff, but if you more from the true crime perspective, it's something a little bit more palatable for that. But if you do not appreciate, again, children death, mutilation, and monsters, don't pick it up.
Yeah, I will say that there is a little bit of a difference to me between, you know, violence being acted upon children and the lens is told solely through a mature adult perspective, and violence being acted upon children where children are sort of the active agents in the story to overcome the evil or the monster or something. So I think that also makes it a little bit more palatable if you're like okay with some but not okay with all, you know, or I think that's a little bit different. I think that's another thing that makes it a more approachable series, I should say. You know, it's not like there's a serial killer and everybody's an adult except for the victims of the murders, you know. That is not where this is coming from. This is like a child's adventure story, but is sort of kind of towing the line between, you know, like an active action and a, you know, suspense horror. So, yeah.
That's a really good point. It's very much like that Stranger Things thing where a lot of people are being impacted, but the children are your lens as well as the heroes. And so that's kind of what's going on in this one too. So that's a really good point.
So yeah, I give it a 10 out of 10 with the caveat of it's a horror that does have like some trigger warnings attached to it. What do you think, Erin?
I'm going to give it I will read it again because I really enjoyed it. And when volume 2 finally comes out, I'm going to pick it up and keep reading it because it's just good old storytelling and suspense.
Heck yeah. So,
Heck yeah.
thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Do you want to do the introduction today? I'm tired.